We'd love to see it. I know there's not that many of us here, but I want to see where everyone's from. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the Migration Summit 2023, organized by MIT Refugee Action Hub, NAMA, and Karam Foundation, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we are exploring the theme of co-creating pathways for learning, livelihood, and dignity through virtual events hosted by participating partners from around the world. In this session, Syrian Youth Empowerment Initiative class of 2022-2023 student Jad Smaeil will tell his story, from displacement to acceptance letter. After experiencing the devastating impact of conflict in Syria, which impacted not only his personal life, but also his access to education, Jad worked against all odds to secure a spot as a top 500 finalist in the RISE Challenge, and less than a year later, secured full need-based aid to attend Brown University in the United States. He will talk about his journey with SYE, this life-changing acceptance letter. Before we start, I do want to mention that there will be brief mentions of violence, death, exploitation, and other consequences of war during this event. My name is Alyssa, I skipped that part, and I am the operations manager at SYE. I work with my team to support Syrian and Iraqi students impacted by conflict, access transformative higher education through 3 different programs. I'm joined here by our lead speaker and one of our students, Jad, who I'll turn it over to soon. Jad joined SYE last summer after participating and being awarded as a finalist in the RISE program. He received an acceptance letter from Brown, and he hopes to explore a number of subjects there, from science to diplomacy to everything in between. Before I pass the mic over to Jad, I do want to spend a few moments sharing a bit about SYE, our founding, and the work we do, so that you can really understand the story. SYE is a college access and peer mentoring program. We are founded and led by Syrians. After our founders were offered the opportunity to complete their studies in America during the height of the war through a Jasur scholarship, they were looking for opportunities to support even more students and give back. And so rather than funding scholarships for each individual student in need, they decided instead to help talented students access already existing funding through mentorship. So our model is designed to help students identify and apply to full scholarships around the world to continue on to higher education, eliminating all the barriers to access. So that includes knowledge barriers, barriers presented by the cost of the application, and barriers presented even by the emotional toll of applying to university, which Jad will share a little bit about the time commitment it really takes to do this. We currently support Syrian, Palestinian, Syrian, and Iraqi students impacted by conflict. And we are supported by our friends at Jasur, Duolingo English Test, I see Laura here, the College Board, Blossom Hill Foundation, Usfree Foundation, and so many more incredible partners. Each year, our students unlock about $14 million in scholarships and choose to attend university around the world on full cost of attendance scholarships. And this is a picture of some of our students. They do continue to build these cross-generational communities in diaspora. So these are some of our students having a reunion in Boston, and these students go to school all over America. So I wanted to share that. And that is enough of me talking. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass the microphone over to Jad, who's going to talk about his own journey. And we will have an opportunity at the end for reflections and questions if you have any. Let me stop sharing now. Awesome. And Jad, I'm going to spotlight you. Perfect. All right, Jad, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hi, everyone. I want to share my journey broken out into a few chapters. First of all, the start of the war, then displacement, then the impact of the war beyond displacement, and the process of applying to college and eventually getting the acceptance letter to my dream college, Brown University. My name is Jad Smaeil, and I was born and raised in Idlib, Syria. When I was 6 years old, the war began and violence broke out around me. As a 6-year-old, my mindset changed almost immediately. I stopped caring about anything but survival. I stopped caring about my own education at a certain point and about my physical health. I even wouldn't pay much attention to my social life because I was convinced that my life in that conflict zone would be over within months. And because of my fear of death and fear of seeing collapsed buildings and dead bodies, I didn't leave my old house for almost 2 years. Life seemed to stop for those 2 years or more, as I found my life entirely at the mercy of the war raging around me. My family eventually had to leave our city of Idlib, a journey that lasted more than a few months, during which we spent almost 2 months on the road between Idlib and the city of Aleppo. We had to stay in a city of tents among dead bodies, where there was no food and basically no shelter. We faced aggression from all sides of the war. But eventually, we found what could be considered a bit of a shelter in the city of Aleppo. We often talk about mental health of displaced populations. In that moment, as I said, I was purely focused on survival, something I have carried with me for the last plus 10 years, and something I want us all to be mindful of as we work with displaced populations. Once we found a bit of safety and were able to settle, the impact of the war and our displacement was more present than ever. Just leaving the place of the most conflict didn't mean we suddenly had access and stability. We had no home, no food, no money, and the inability to continue my education. As I worked to secure a small amount of money for my family to get back on my feet, the child labor industry tried to take advantage of me and prevent me from securing a normal childhood or education. I had no access to education for 5 consecutive years as a result of the war and these practices. This impacted me deeply and my perceptions of what was possible. I was only able to attend 2 months of the first grade before the war started. I wasn't able to attend any school whatsoever until the sixth grade. I want to repeat that I wasn't able to attend any school whatsoever until the sixth grade. This caused me to feel like I was nothing in society, which lit a fire within me. I started studying alone because getting a good education was way too expensive at the time, even if we could find a school nearby. I was finally admitted into one of the best high schools in the city. After, of course, a long journey of hard work and studying, I was able to pass the acceptance tests and the interviews to that school. It was then that I realized how educationally far behind I was, which made me work even harder to overcome that educational setback. I actually heard about Syrian Youth Empowerment Initiative in the seventh grade, around the time I was admitted to the school. Between catching up on what I missed, I also anchored my goals around what SYE had to offer and what felt closer to reach than ever before: a world-class education in a stable part of the world. I started preparing myself even more, working even harder alone at home. I joined activities in my community and started studying English alone to prepare myself for English proficiency tests. As early as the seventh grade, I started researching universities and what they were looking for. I was enthusiastic, but mostly I wanted to make my application strong enough so that I could get out of my current environment. One of my many attempts to get access to higher education was applying to the Rise for the World Challenge, a program SYE will be presenting about with Rise next week during the Migration Summit. This program provides scholarships to 100 top finalists and is a great opportunity for students from my background to access funding for higher education, funding that I knew was limited if I was just applying directly to universities. During my RISE application, I started a local initiative to collect donations to help children and families most affected by war, while also starting a fundraiser to support these families. While working on my initiative, I ran into many problems, some of which are: first of all, I faced problems in getting in touch with the war-affected families in the destroyed parts of my city due to the restrictions on those areas, not to mention the dangers in entering those conflict zones. Second of all, I spent weeks or even months advocating for my initiative. using all sources possible, from social media to presentations and public speaking in my local community. I was attempting to get people to donate to my initiative, but this was a strange concept in my community, to see a young person doing a project like that one. Much like I will discuss when I talk about my college applications, the time investment for RISE was very steep for a student like me who had already missed school as a child and studied largely alone, and who was facing economic barriers and social pressure to focus on my local studies and supporting us financially. I was taking a risk on my future, one I wasn't sure would pay off. I was proud I was able to become a finalist, but did not make it to the top 100, which would have given me the opportunity to secure a full scholarship. That being said, my hard work did not eventually pay off, and I'm glad I went after every opportunity despite the limitations I faced. I have been valedictorian since 7th grade and was eventually admitted to the Syrian Youth Empowerment Initiative's one-year program in my final year of high school, a program with a 10% acceptance rate. I want to pause here to share something with this group. I believe that the burden of continuing an education should not fall on an elementary school student's shoulders. So many of us felt like we were nothing in society, like I once said, and only some of us were able to overcome the financial burdens and social pressure and continue studying. I leave a question here. How can we work together to make sure that students are supported at every age to ensure conflict doesn't stop us from achieving our goals? Now back to my story. Just getting the grades and getting into the school and gaining access to mentorship through SYE still wasn't enough to pave a clear path for me to higher education. The barriers that existed since I was 6 years old still existed and manifested in different ways. I want to share some of these challenges here in this forum. First of all, the lack of internet and electricity in Syria made it difficult to take the required Duolingo test. Plus, I was only able to communicate with my mentors on occasion and often missed SYE's deadlines. The electricity outages were compounded by the time zone differences between me and my mentors. And of course, to take the SAT at the only test center available in my country, I had to overcome a number of obstacles to travel to Damascus from Aleppo, the cost of that trip being one of them. I also struggled to open websites like the College Board CSS website to request financial aid just because I am in Syria. And my teachers didn't know how to write my recommendation letters, leaving me to provide them with the resources and support. And while my family was passionate about me securing a higher education, they did not think what I was doing applying abroad was worth it. They wanted me to focus on local exams rather than spending time exploring other options, something that made this entire journey even more difficult for me. And last but not least, being an international student with full financial need made it difficult to research universities and identify opportunities, even with SYE's support. Despite all of these hurdles and the disruptions to my education, I am proudly standing here with an acceptance letter and full financial aid from Brown University in the United States, where I plan to discover more about the intersection between science and diplomacy. In addition to my university studies, I have of course planned to give back to SYE, the initiative which made me and paved the way for me to get to where I am right now. And I hope to contribute in securing a bright future for not only students from my country, but also for students from all parts of the world who face similar circumstances to the ones I did. If I could leave this group with some takeaways from my story before we offer some time for questions, they would be this. First of all, I want us to be mindful of how we present mental health support as a component of access programs. As a teenager who has been just trying to survive since I was 6 years old, my perception of mental health looks very different from those who don't have lived experiences of displacement. And of course, the hurdles to education for students from my background are immense. I am so grateful for the support of SYE, but we need more actors to help solve some of the ones I discussed. And I was part of a community of hundreds of talented youth impacted by conflict. give us a chance to show the world what we can do. Now I will turn it back to Alyssa to lead the question and answer. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you so much, Jad. Can you all hear me again? Just a thumbs up if you can hear me. Awesome. Jad, we are so proud of you and all of our students and all of the students around the world that are going through this very, very difficult process. We know how much time and emotional energy and just fighting with what was happening around you it took to get where you are. And thank you so much for presenting. Before I open it up to some reflections, Q&A, thoughts, just kind of an open forum, I want to take a moment and I'm going to reshare my screen. Can you all see my screen? I want to just visualize some of the things that Jad shared so people can have it to think about and reflect on. So Jad mentioned multiple barriers to access. So first, access during K through 12, and then access during his higher education journey. So I kind of noted down some things as I listened to Jad tell me what he wanted to share. And so in terms of K through 12, Jad faced the lack of access to safe, like physical places to study. There were financial barriers and exploitative labor practices for children. And of course, the time being unhoused and in transit, making it very difficult to attend a school. So these are all factors that affected Jad's access to education on his younger years. And then we look at the access to higher education. I actually had to break this into 2 slides. Because there was quite a bit that was happening here. So Jad mentioned limited electricity and internet. This is a common problem for Syrian students everywhere that they're living, essentially, when they're trying to do this process. And that affects a lot of things, from the application itself to communicating with people that are trying to support you. Limited scholarship opportunities, so not being able to find enough opportunities that would allow Jad to attend university. Lack of community support and understanding in the community surrounding Jad of what he was doing and why he was spending 5 hours a night on his computer trying to write essays. Lack of access to required testing. So Jad mentioned the only SAT test center was quite far from his home. And this was a test that he wanted to take to ensure that he could go to university. Lack of information available. So where do you get the information about where to apply and how to apply? And then the high time commitment as well, asking students that are going through things economically and trying to pursue their high school education in a country where it's difficult to do so, asking them to then invest even more time in a process to achieve higher education is really a challenge. So I wanted to document these for us. And then I wanted to stop sharing my screen and stop talking and see if anyone here wants to share anything with us about reflections on what was said, their own stories. I know there are lots of Syrian students here. I see you. I see students that have applied to SYE, and I see Laura as well. So we can just open it up if anyone has questions for Jad or me or wants to share anything. You can raise your hand or just send it in the chat and I will narrate it aloud. I feel like everyone's working and they're listening in the background, so no worries. It is okay if nobody has questions, but I could cold call. Jad, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I actually have, hi everyone. Thank you, Alyssa and Jad. It's not a question, but mostly like a reflection from what I was hearing from Jad. And so, well, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story, you know, of success, but of struggle and challenges too. And I think it's good that you kind of walk us through, you know, the entire journey. I really like the approach that you had on the importance of mental health, because unfortunately it's not something that we hear as much as needed. And, you know, mostly, you know, people working in this field really have to think when we're developing, you know, programs or are, you know, trying to target, you know, the needs of displaced people. We need to think holistically, you know, and really, you know, not only offer this academic development or access to different networks, but really think of the person that it's coming from a background that was harsh, and I'm very proud to see that, you found that network of support and community with SYE. And I really appreciate, you saying that the importance of it, because, unfortunately, I don't listen that a lot. Thanks so much.
On that note, Jad, I'm going to put you on the spot. SYE, we have a WhatsApp group. I see Ragad here as well. What role do you think that the community of these hundreds of students going through this process with you, did that help you? Did it put pressure on you? Talk more about the SYE community, if you can. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot.
If there was only one thing that was making me or motivating me to continue this journey, was the community that SYE built. Because being surrounded by such amazing students, SYE students, was helping me to see that others are actually facing the same problems that I am facing. So I was like, I'm not alone in this journey. There's someone also helping me, supporting me, and going through the same problems and obstacles as I'm going through. So probably seeing them work hard to overcome these obstacles actually helped me in not only finding solutions to overcome my own obstacles, but also to see that others are working hard and doing their best just to continue this journey and finish it and get acceptance into a university. So the community was the best community that anyone could ever ask, because it was built by these amazing students, and it was mentored by you, Elisa. So there's nothing else I can say.
Jad, this question isn't for you, but Dr. Winokur asked a question about how we can overcome some of the barriers around lack of documentation, like your degrees and your transcripts. I know that you have access to your degrees and your transcripts and your grades, but some students don't. So I'll pose this if anyone has thought about or wants to share reflections on how we can overcome lack of that. And I can share personally that we spend a lot of time working with universities when students are missing documentation or something that the university wants the student doesn't have because of their context. And it has put a lot of burden on SYE to provide that support and that documentation that the local schools aren't able to. But I don't think that's a sustainable answer, that every college access organization working with a small population of students gets to step in. So I share that, Dr. Winokur, from my perspective. Okay. Jad, I have another question for you, because we've talked about this before. We talk about how SYE is sort of at the end of the journey, right? You already have done all the things you need to do by the time you apply to SYE. You have to have studied English, like you mentioned. You have to think about extracurriculars. What do you think organizations, people, communities can do so that students younger can start to think about these things and navigate the difficulty of the environment they're in with, okay, I'm trying to achieve higher education. This is what's going to be asked of me. Do you have any thoughts about that, Jad? Because I know you've told me everyone starts young. They already know about it.
Yes, in a matter of fact, I have some thoughts about that. I don't believe that anyone who is probably in 11th or 12th grade, when he starts a program like SYE, is able to secure university acceptance, because the journey doesn't start in the 10th or 11th grade. It starts from way before, especially if you're an international student whose main language is not English. So I believe that the journey is supposed to start somewhere around 9th grade, when the student is supposed to start learning English, improving his English, so that he can write essays and he can conduct or do interviews and conduct research, so that he would approve his university application. So yes, there is a very bright idea. If we can all organizations can start like a program for younger generations in 9th or like 8th grade or somewhere like that to help students learn English and to support them to join extracurricular activities so that they could have a perfect activities list. Well, I was a little bit aware of that, so that's why I started my journey a little bit earlier, as I said in my story, from 7th grade. But if someone who's only found out about the university application in his 11th or 12th grade, he won't be able to join as many activities to put in his activities list, or to improve his English to the level that can allow him to write essays and do interviews with universities. So I believe that yes, a program for younger generations is highly needed, and it's actually going to be successful.
In 7th grade, how old were you, Jad? Somebody asked.
I don't know. I was actually probably 14 or 15.
I have another question, but I want to pause to see if anybody has any questions. Okay. Jad, I'm curious if you can talk more about the testing experience, like taking all of these tests. I know in Laura's session, she talked about some of these tests as well, but coming from your background, what was it like to have to take Duolingo and SAT, and what were the challenges that you really faced with that?
Okay, so the tests were actually very different from the tests that I usually take. Like the SAT is different, totally different from the normal English tests in my country, and of course the Duolingo too. So actually getting to know about the SAT and the Duolingo was a very big surprise for me, because I was like, how am I going to prepare for these tests in only 1 year, and how am I going to take to get good scores so that I could apply to universities? That was very overwhelming, but my level of English was a little bit good before I joined SYE and before I found out about the Duolingo test and before I started preparing for Duolingo. That actually helped me a little bit in my preparation for the Duolingo test and for the SAT. And of course, with the help of SYE and all the resources that I found for the study for the Duolingo and for the SAT, actually helped me in getting to know what the SAT looked like and do the test, like the requirements of the test and what was I supposed to study. Because, well, the approach is totally different from what I usually study in high school. So yes, the resources that I studied were very helpful, and that actually built me for the SAT test and for the Duolingo. The Duolingo practice tests are the most important factor of my approach to study for the Duolingo. So yes, that's my answer.
I have a question about extracurriculars. Dr. Winokur asked a good question. Is it possible for us to modify application processes so that life experiences can carry as much weight as traditional extracurriculars? So Jad, I don't remember your activity list, but did you include things like family caretaking? I know that you have a big role in your family, taking care of your siblings. Did you talk about that at all in your application? I know that a lot of students did, but I'm curious about your perspective here.
No, in my activities list, I did not include anything about my family contributions or working to support my family, because I had activities that were a little bit, I thought at least, that were a little bit more important than family contributions, and I didn't want to show that side of me to universities in my application. So I did not include, even though there were many family contributions and many jobs that I had to do in order to support my family, but I did not include any of them in my activities list. I only included the ones that were career-oriented and cultural activities and school spirit activities.
Awesome. I have a question that might stress you out, but this is kind of the next step. So Jad and our community of 35, 38 students got full scholarships. So now what? And I'm looking as the visa group is having messages coming in. So Jad, tell me a little bit about the struggles if a student, and you have a passport and you're able to access this. I know some students don't, but Can you share more about the different hurdles, even beyond the acceptance that you're facing as a student from this background?
Alyssa, I think I might have lagged. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so the visa group is active. So I was asking if you can talk a little bit more about when you get the acceptance, then what? What are the other hurdles that you're facing now that you have the acceptance letter to even get to the university?
Well, after getting acceptance into university, I thought that my journey was over. Like, I'm done. I'm finally going to get higher education. But then I found out that there is this long visa process, which was way more difficult than the actual university application. So yes, after getting admitted, the journey doesn't stop. There are many things that you need to do, especially if you are a high school student in your last year. You will have to study even harder for your last year of school, so that you wouldn't your admissions won't be rescinded. And of course, then you'll have to apply for the visa, which is a very difficult journey that I haven't started yet, and I feel guilty that I haven't started yet because I believe that it's going to take way too long. But yes, actually, I believe that the hardest part of getting higher education and traveling to your university is you're applying to visa and of course the university application, but I believe that the visa process is way too difficult.
And just for some context, there's a lot of costs associated with the visa process as well that are sometimes overlooked. So there's lots of different payments that happen after that, which can make this really challenging for students. Okay, I have two questions in the chat. One is, can you tell us any advice for young adults who are starting their journey at the age 18 to 20? Maybe this is a question for Jad, maybe it's a question for me, but Jad, if you have anything, you can say it and then I'll share as well.
Okay, I think I can share some ideas. If you are 18 and you are going to apply to universities, I believe that you need to start work because you're a little bit late, not a lot, but you can still do it. I believe that you need to work on your English so that you can write essays and of course do interviews. And I believe you need to have a full activities list, like a very good activities list. Of course, there are many resources that can help you with the kind of activities that you need to participate in. But yes, I believe that your English and the activities list are the most important stuff that you can do, that you can work on in only 2 years. So, and of course, you don't have to apply to university when you're in your last year of high school. So yes, you still have the time to apply to university even if you graduated from high school. What about you, Elisa? What thoughts do you have?
Well, I was going to say all of those things, and I think we talk a lot about, we're talking about the US because Jad is going to France, but to not overlook local opportunities closer to home. Don't always be looking in the West. There are many, many opportunities available to you. But again, when we're reviewing applications right now for our future students, and English is a big factor. In a short timeline, you sort of have to be able to, if you're thinking of going to an English-speaking university, you are going to have to prove that level. And we talked about activities and being able to say what you've been doing with your time. And again, that doesn't have to be traditional things. That can be a job that is traditional, but that can be a job that you spend a lot of time on. It can be lots of different things. So don't try to compare your path to others. There are lots of paths. I know there are other folks that work in college counseling on this call who will tell you they've worked with students from many different backgrounds. That would be my little addition there. I really like this question. I don't know, Mohammed asked it. How did you find out about SYE? And the question is really like, how can we get the word out about programs like this to students in less developed areas or areas where there aren't in Aleppo? We have hundreds of students that apply from Aleppo every year. So you heard about SYE, but how can we spread the word, and how did you first find out about SYE? Start there.
Okay, so I think SYE goes back to 2016 or 2017, and I happen to know someone who applied to SYE in 2016 and got into Harvard. And this person was my friend, and he talked to me about SYE. And since the 7th grade, I heard about SYE from this person, and I started working on SYE. And I believe that if we can probably organize local presentations and local seminars in Syria about SYE. It's going to be much helpful. It's going to be very helpful to spread the word about SYE because I believe that everyone who knows about SYE only knows about it from either relatives or a friend or from the social media, from Facebook and Instagram. And I believe that's not enough because there are many capable students, many students who can get into universities like Ivy League universities or universities all over the US, Canada, and Europe, but don't know about SYE, and they apply on their own. They spend much money on the tests, and they might fail in the end. So if we need to make a lot of people know about SYE, I believe, yes, the best thing we can do is designing or organizing seminars in local seminars in the cities of Syrian cities like Aleppo, Damascus, Latakia, but I believe we already have many SYE students there. But yes, we can do these seminars, and in this way, I believe that the number of students who will apply to organizations or initiatives like SYE is going to improve a lot.
I think one challenge that maybe some other folks on here face is being digital first. And so we're working remotely. We don't have people working on the ground, which can present a lot of challenges, especially when we're thinking about the fact that students apply on the internet, on their phones, on their laptops. Taking the Duolingo test requires laptops, so we still have barriers to reach students who don't have access to even less access. I know that Jad will say he doesn't have access to electricity very much, but even less access where they don't get online enough to even see applications. So what can be done there, and what can be done even younger there, like Jad talks about, and getting information to students that are in these backgrounds, that are in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, where they're not connected. So I think this is a challenge that maybe others on here face, and students on here might be frustrated by it as well. We have lots of people on this call. And that is a good transition. Somebody asked about the prep program. So SYE also runs a prep program, which Jad didn't go through, which is a younger years program, so 10th and 11th graders. And what SYE found was that there were lots of really awesome students who were applying to our one-year program, but they were missing some of the key factors that we saw were leading to success in the model we work on. Doesn't mean that they weren't going to be successful in life, but they were not able to be successful in our one-year program, given it's 6 months, 7 months, your speed applying to university, you have to already have these foundations. Like Jad talked about, the things that Jad worked so hard to develop. So we introduced the program to catch some students up. And it was really targeted at students from areas that didn't have as much access, like Mohammed said, and particularly female applicants that sometimes were not having as much access to extracurriculars in certain regions. And so what we do in that program is it's really sort of a crash course in leadership and community activism in a lot of ways. But our students are doing writing assignments, they're reading books, they are designing a social impact project and working in a team to implement it. And we have lots of now SYE little social impact projects around. And it's kind of an unconventional program, but it's been working, and students have been getting a lot from it. And we're looking to expand that to even more regions to be able to help more students get to the level that we're saying, okay, now we can work with you through the one-year program. What is SYE's capacity? Oh, I love this question. Jad can't answer this because I would like to help every student that comes to us. We had 870 applications. I would love to take all of them. We are limited by a few factors, and this is important to talk about. So one of the factors is the financial factor. So like Jad said, there's a lot of finances that go into applying. Students have to take SAT, Duolingo. Sometimes universities have application fees. And SYE absorbs all of that for students so that students that are the highest need can still apply to university. So we're limited by the number of waivers. That's number one. That's a huge one. The second one is we're limited by the number of mentors that we can recruit. So all of our students work one-on-one with a mentor. And we have to have high quality mentors. We want to make sure that students are getting the most support. These are volunteers, but they do have to be volunteers who are committed to saying, I'm going to spend 3 to 4 hours a week with a student, because we saw all the hurdles that Jad faced. Somebody needs to be there to help students navigate these hurdles, to encourage students when they feel they are going to quit, to help with the essay that is such a complicated essay that students from these backgrounds have never seen or heard of before, and understanding how to do this. So our capacity right now, we take about 85 to 100 students in our one-year program and about 50 students into our prep program. So yeah, I mean, this is for anyone trying to do this kind of work in any context, there are definitely limits to how many students you can take and the quality of support you provide. And we want to make sure that we're providing students with good support. If you take them for a year and you distract them from all the things in their lives and you give them poor support, that would be doing a disservice to the students and the community. So that's my answer there. Thank you, Noor, for that question. Anything else? All right. Well, Jad, because nobody has any questions, I want to end with a hi. Do you want to share some of the other results from SYU's, like your peers in SYE and where they're headed off to college, if you know? I know, so if you don't know, I can say it, but I feel like you might have some idea of where some of your friends are headed.
No, why don't you tell us?
He's like, I don't want to do it wrong. All right, so this year I will share some of our results, and we're still waiting for some as well. So this year I don't want to start with the Ivies because I don't believe that the Ivy League presents the best education, but they're the most recent in my brain. So this year, 5 SYE students are headed to Harvard on full scholarship. We had 3 Stanford acceptances. It's not an Ivy. Jad and another one of his peers are headed to Brown. We had a few UPenn acceptances with full scholarship. We had a few Columbia acceptances with full scholarship. We had a full scholarship to the University of Denver. We have a student headed there. We are waiting on the results of the Salve Regina scholarship that I know others are waiting for as well, and we're hopeful for that. We had a full tuition scholarship to the University of St. Thomas. We had a full scholarship to the University of British Columbia, 2 to McGill. Now I don't have my list in front of me, but we are so very proud of our students. And if I leave you with one note, you may have noticed I said a lot of very brand name schools. You probably heard all of these brand name schools, these famous schools. I would love for more schools to accept more students. You know, there will be a good education everywhere in the world, and I just want to see the expansion of that. So that is my note I leave here on the way I said successes. I want to just re-emphasize that, you know, we want to make sure that students are accessing education in a lot of different contexts, not just the Ivies with the money. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to let us all off this call. I want to say thank you. Jad, do you have any final words before we get off the call?
I believe there are many students here, so yes, I have some advice. I believe, I almost said everything, but I will need to repeat it. First of all, no matter how many difficulties you go through this process, just keep going through, because you won't face as horrible problems and obstacles as I did. So, and I was able to overcome it all. So I believe no matter how bad you are in English, no matter how bad your environment is, you can apply to universities, and you can get accepted, and you can get out of your current environment. And I believe that if you should apply to SYE or any other organization that helps students apply to universities, because you need a community like the community SYE built, so that you can get support and be motivated by this community. And that's all. I hope everyone to get accepted to the university he wants. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Jad. I have nothing else to add. Thank you all so much. It was lovely to see some familiar faces. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the Migration Summit. Thank you for sending links, Camilla. I almost forgot that. So yeah, we'll see you at some future Migration Summit events. Thank you all. Camilla, can I just end the call, or you have something to say?
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I actually, I'm flagging this just because we have a bit more time. We had a question from Sarah actually in the chat before I sent the links. And so I don't know if you want to address those questions.
So Sarah? Okay, so Sarah said, what if I'm interested in studying architecture, but few universities offer full ride scholarships? Oh, this is frustrating to me. I find this with art students. So we have our first student going to pursue a BFA at Tufts this year on a full scholarship. And one of my frustrations is that there are students that are interested in all different types of subjects, but yet a lot of the scholarships are limited in what students can study. And this is a great example of a student that's really passionate about architecture, art, or music. And yet a lot of students from these backgrounds, they don't have as many choices. So I don't have an answer for you, Sarah, of what to do. I think that part of what needs to happen is to evaluate what your goals are, to say, okay, is architecture more important, or is getting this education more important, and what are the next steps beyond that? It's not to say don't apply to architecture, but it is something to think about, and it is something I want this group to think about as how can we expand opportunities for students that are interested in fields that are not funded? Because just because a student is from a conflict background does not mean they should not be able to pursue their music school dreams. And that is something I think we also need to think about collectively. And you as an individual, Sarah, need to think about what is your end goal and what situation do you want to be in. I see two more questions. So yes, we have three students last year headed to MIT, and one is heading this year to MIT. And yes, one of them, I did speak at the Migration Summit, I believe, with Paper Airplanes last year. So yes, Syrian students are getting accepted to MIT, SYU students are getting accepted to MIT. And then is there an intention to offer a program for international students outside of Syria? This is a tricky one. I know Majid is on this call, or maybe he dropped off. Yes, he dropped off. So I will say, if you are not Syrian and you are a student, you can still go to our Facebook page, and you can go and see our groups, and you will see an undergraduate support group. You can join that group if you're not in Syria. You can see all of our resources. You're welcome to go through our classroom, look at our list, all of that. We do accept Syrian students living anywhere in the world, and Iraqi students. So we have Syrian students living in Turkey, in Jordan, in Germany, in Lebanon this year. So yes, if you are Syrian or Palestinian Syrian or Iraqi living anywhere in the world, you're welcome to apply. If you are just a student from a conflict background who wants to access some resources, feel free to check out our Facebook page. The resources apply in most contexts, so you're welcome to have a look. All right. Thank you all. Camilla, is there anything I left off that we have to say before we head off?
Wonderful. No, everything awesome. Thank you so much, Jad, for, the awesome story. Thank you, Alyssa. And, we really look forward to seeing you next week in the other session that SYE is planning. And, I'm just really excited from reading in the chat, and hopefully this new applicants get to different universities at the US. And also very happy to see Eileen is going to be mentoring also, possibly. So yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. We hope to see you around in this next couple of weeks, and to continue building community together. Bye everyone. Thanks so much.